Hello. Welcome everybody. I'm just going to turn my Wi-Fi off because just make sure it doesn't slow that down. So, how is everybody doing? As always, there's always a 90-second kind of period where I just mumble, which is the best part. And if you missed us, you would have missed me fanboying over both Jake and Bianca, mainly Jake, because he looks so dapper, getting himself ready for his wedding. But yeah, there's obviously this period where we just have to wait for people to join us. If you are here already and you are an eager beaver waiting to listen to these two legends share some information, please say hi in the comments. And if you have any questions set already, then please let us know, because then we can get into those. But it's nice to see if you're joining and listening. If not, we'll just talk to ourselves. I'm pretty good at that. I think both of these two are as well. Although there's three of us here today, and this is pretty exciting because this is the first time we've done this as well. I haven't got a clue how it's going to work. I'm just going to make sure I don't jump in and butt into anybody talking, but we'll see how we go. I might just get started. As I said, if you are here and you have got questions, please add them to the comments and I will ask them both when we have the opportunity. And if you see me trying to listen and multitask whilst reading, then bear with me because that's easier said than done. So we're here today to talk to these two who put together a white paper around the challenges of well-being strategies and them potentially not working as well as they could be. It's probably the best way to put that. And have some really kind of cool bits in regards to some of the things which are coming up from well-being strategies and maybe the one-size-fits-all approach and the negative effects of that and the lack of engagement within well-being strategies, especially within kind of the new age outside of COVID. I don't know whether, do you call it like after Christ, like after COVID? Is it the same kind of thing? Do we use that as our terminology? So AC after COVID or A19 after COVID-19.
Where have you got that from?
I'm just making it up. Come on, you know. I just
anyone really go after COVID.
But after COVID, wellbeing strategies. Yeah, seeing that engagement from people in different aspects. Before we start, we'll get introductions. I will do myself really quickly. And then I'll get these two guys to say hi and introduce themselves. So for the majority of you guys, you know who I am. I'm Rich. I'm a high-performance coach and founder of Employees Health, helping leadership and employees find success in both their personal and professional lives. I'm actually part of the HumanOS team of Bianca's awesome digital platform, helping people, and just great friends with Jake because we're kind of twins, I say. He's better looking though. Anyway, move on. So yeah, that's me done. Out of the way, I don't need to talk much anymore. Ladies first, Bianca, can you introduce yourself?
Age before beauty. No problem. Yes. So strict instructions to keep this brief. So that's what I will try and do. My name is Bianca Rigo. I'm co-founder of HumanOS. We're a health optimization company. We have two main goals. Number one, to make world-class coaching available to every employee within the organization. We don't care where you sit within the workplace. We believe that if you are in the workplace, you deserve to be seen and heard and valued and supported. And so that's what we want to do. We want to provide a very holistic and preventative approach to health. On the other side of it, we are collecting a lot of data and we are working with organizations from the top as well as the bottom down to look at their workplace and the actual challenges they're seeing within their teams, within their individuals, and generally within their strategies, so we can build more effective performance and wellbeing strategies that put employee health and business performance back hand in hand. I have had a very spaghetti career. I graduated in psychology. I spent just shy of 5 years in the corporate world working for the largest IT services company. I experienced my own burnout I had my own journey with my health and depression and anxiety and grief. And then I went into the wellness world. I started coaching. I've got over 10,000 one-to-one coaching hours. I then started delivering talks, designing wellbeing strategies. So I've worked with American Express, Snapchat, University of Cambridge. That's how I actually met Jake, and we started doing some work together at his previous company. And now I'm all things HumanOS and keeping my own wellness in that somewhere, trying to.
Yeah, pretty cool. When we got on, it's like, I don't know how you have time. I'm not one of these people to be up in the gym at 6 a.m. deadlifting. I mean, I'm always impressed when I see that on Instagram. Thanks, B. Yeah, doing some great things. Both the company is disrupting the space, and you as a human being just bringing energy to the wellbeing space. So glad to have you on, and glad to call you a friend. Jake, your turn. Up that, beat that.
I'm not going to be able to beat that, but I do enjoy how both you, Rich, and you, B, have buttered me up with compliments today. So I'm wondering what the request is after the call. For those who don't know, Bianca is a couple of days older than me, so I think she's gained that out. As you can see, my name is Jake Sanders. I am what I like to call a failed sports scientist. Wanted to be a sports scientist from a very young age, and then realised I didn't like working in professional sports. So it's meant that for the last 8 years, I've been working in corporate wellness, both from a consultancy side and an in-house side. And for the last 3 years, I've been the global wellbeing lead across 2 organizations with large multinational FMCG organizations. So currently at Diageo as a global health and wellbeing manager. And my remit is just to look at how can we improve the physical and mental well-being of our people, but also how can we connect well-being to business performance, and how do we measure the impact of what we're doing. So lots of thoughts on how we can talk about not only what we do today, but how do we measure it and how do we report the impact that we're having.
Yeah, you're my go-to for organizational well-being. The person I can call and go, look, Jake, what's going on? Or I need some advice on little bits within teams and organizations. You're the person I go to, just because you, like Ryan Hopkins, have this numbers brain who just going to remember those statistics. So I'm like, yes, use you, speak to you. And the fact you're just a lad as well, which is a big tick in my box.
Am I not a lad?
You are. You're a ladette. Can I call you a ladette?
Let's move on.
So the white paper, I'm making some notes earlier on just so I could bring something to this. And there's some really interesting bits in here. I'm just going to read some stuff which stuck out, and then I'm going to allow you two just to share some of your thoughts on that white paper and some of the big bits you take away from there. So the thing that stood out most to start with was this: we have an increase in wellbeing strategy, increase in wellbeing initiatives within organizations. From COVID, it become a must-have, must-do thing for organizations. But since that time, we've also seen a massive increase in sickness leave or absence, both from a health and mental health standpoint. I'll use the term well-being or mental well-being standpoint. So that was the first thing that stood out. The other part was only 23% of workers are thriving. Employers and employees are no better off than they were pre-COVID. And stress, depression, anxiety are still rising. And then the last piece is around engagement. And it's 20% of employees joining or 20% of employees who are joining in wellbeing initiatives, with 73% that do engage drop off after only 3 months of engaging. So to me, there's 2 impacts there. Some of the stuff that companies are putting on, or people like us are helping support with, aren't having the impact that they should be. And people aren't engaging with them. And if they are, it's not lasting very long. Mm-hmm. So let's start with your thoughts on that. Why is that? What's your thoughts, Bianca?
So firstly, I think, the reason that the number one reason that we formed HumanOS and then also did this white paper is we're seeing this huge discrepancy between not even just corporate wellbeing solutions, but the number of wellbeing solutions and apps. I think there's something like 500,000 wellbeing apps now. And so we have more resources and options than ever before, but yet our well-being is the lowest it's ever been. And so for me, that was a shocking revelation. It's like, well, why, if there's more options, is this going in the wrong direction? And then on that engagement piece, and it's anywhere between 2 and 4.9% is the average engagement rate for a corporate wellbeing solution. And so again, for me, as someone who has been in the corporate world as a coach, and then as someone who is delivering talks and designing these strategies, I was like, well, how do we fix this? Why is that engagement so low? How do we prevent these numbers and these statistics from continuing to go the wrong way? You know, we are in this stress pandemic. Stress increased by 13% in the workplace last year alone. We saw a 44% increase in suicidal thoughts. The average age of burnout is 32. 70% of professionals within the UK are experiencing at least one symptom of burnout. And so for me, it's not just how do we help individuals optimize their health, and how do we simplify that again, and how do we give them the support, but actually as a society and as a culture, how do we potentially reframe and look at the way we're approaching work, and how do we allow for sustained high performance again? And this is something Jake and I speak about a lot, because we're not the individuals who think people should be wrapped in bubble wrap and it's about avoiding stress and it's about finishing at 5 every day. We're all about high performance. So actually, how do you facilitate an environment and a workplace that allows for that high performance sustainably?
I think as well, we started, Rich, joking about after COVID. There is a little bit of a COVID hangover going on. If we think that effectively 3 years ago, us as individuals, all that we really had going on was I got up, I did some work, and then I went for my walk in the morning and my walk in the afternoon because I'm allowed outside at those times. But otherwise, I couldn't interact with other human beings other than through a video call. And I think that there's a little bit of a hangover in terms of now we suddenly had loads more life come in, end of 21, 22. And then now we're in a position where we've got lots more going on, but probably our working habits shifted where we were working a lot harder during COVID because there's a nervousness. Maybe I'm going to lose my job. Maybe I'm going to be furloughed. And that kind of individual culture has kind of seemed to carry on. If we think back to pre-2020, how many people were using Microsoft Teams, Slack, Zoom as a standard, whereas now you'll be hard pushed to walk into an organization that doesn't have at least one of those tools, if not multiple. So there's this relationship with work that has changed. And then suddenly we have information so readily available to us all the time, but very little time to engage with it. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing massively is how do we create that time and space for people to prioritize not just their health, but hobbies, things that may have them feel fulfilled, which I think is what's driving this increase in stress, depression, and anxiety that we're seeing, and ill health overall, that's starting to grow.
Yeah. I think this is just listening to both of you. There's so much to kind of understand and so many different elements to the whole picture, because you could pick different bits about strategy and how it's engaging. There's different bits to individuals and how individuals engage as well. And then I look back to pre-COVID, and although I wasn't so much into this corporate space as much then, how people then worked and engaged at that point compared to how they work and engage now. From the two experts in the room, what do you guys seeing as the difference?
Well, I think there's probably a really easy way to open this up is when you look at how well-being is treated within an organization, and this is coming from my side of having been external consulting in and now internal working within the systems. And I think B, you can probably speak to your experience talking about HumanOS with clients, is that there wasn't a direct desire or connection as much. I've been having this conversation for 8 years, and the way it's shifted in terms of where it sits in an organization. So I think probably the primary thing right now is a lot of companies don't necessarily know where well-being sits and what it plays into. And that is what we're starting to evolve. Because that, if you think about it, that sentence from the Oxford Wellbeing Research Institute going, there's been no impact of workplace wellbeing programs. That's hit people really hard, and that doesn't mean that people haven't been working hard or haven't been doing the right things or haven't. It's not an issue with effort. I think it just highlights the fact that wellbeing has sat in many different areas of the business. There have been many different approaches to the challenge, and because there hasn't been a consistency, the results are so wide. That's why when you average that out, you get this headline, which the press picks up on, that there's been zero impact. And I think that's probably a symptom of where well-being sits in organisations has been widespread.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to recognise, stress is not a recent occurrence. When you look at the data and statistics pre-pandemic, 85% of working professionals within the UK would class themselves as stressed and overwhelmed. It's just now post-pandemic, there's a spotlight on this area. And then you combine that with the fact that not just at individual level, but organizational level, there is so much unknown. The pandemic created a lot of fear. It was the first time for a lot of people, they felt really out of control. They had no routine. They had a lot of uncertainty. And that has a lasting impact. And now you couple that with everything we're seeing in the world and in today, with the political unrest, with the financial uncertainty, with the huge technological advancements that are going on, massive changes in the way we're working. Organizations are now having to say, okay, this may not have had the impact we wanted to have, but it's now getting to a point where we cannot ignore it. We have to be doing something. And we're also seeing the most generational difference within the workforce as well. And if companies want to continue to attract top talent, they are looking at these areas of their well-being, of their physical health, of their mental health, of their professional development, of their personal development. They are likely to take pay cuts if they are doing work they find meaningful. So organizations now are in this position where they're like, okay, well, how are we signaling to our people that we value them? And how are we aligning our organizational values with our individual values? And that's sort of the shift we're seeing. A lot of conversations we're having is really in that cultural piece, top down and bottom up.
Well, I think there's a massive part in that, in the sense of the generational difference we saw just yesterday. Gallup's State of the Workplace report came out, showing pretty much status quo, same as last year is the same as this year, is basically the top level. But the biggest shift was that the engagement in over 35s versus under 35s, and that big difference. And I think that and part of what we've talked about in the white paper around this pursuit of sustainable high performance is how that narrative is delivered to our employees, and how do we build trust with employees around what we mean. Because ultimately, if we think about, for a business to be able to pay us our salaries and for us to have a job to come to every day, the business has to be profitable. But there's no, as uncomfortable that is as a conversation sometimes, performance is the only currency that matters in terms of, otherwise no one has a job. It's how we get that profit and how we have people is where sustainable high performance, that conversation is about. It's making sure that people have ultimately the right enough physical and mental energy to be able to show up at work, perform at work, go home and have a fulfilled life. And if we can support people to do that, understand when they can recover and rest in periods throughout the year, and whether that be just on a daily basis, not being back to back in meetings, on a weekly basis, doing things that fulfill you in hobbies at the weekend, to a monthly and yearly basis, which is using annual leave to actually take a time and recover, not replying to emails, not messaging people. They're, as unsexy as that stuff all is, that's so important. And I think that within that, one of the big drivers of that is just individual permission. And that's where I think there are two drivers within that, is what's the stance that leadership take for that? And then how does an individual see their own purpose within work? And that's why I think that coaching as an intervention is such a powerful intervention, because it's around enabling someone to realize for themselves their self-awareness that actually this is how I perform best and how to communicate that with their colleagues. And if more people did that, a lot of the well-being stuff we'd solve within the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of coaching. The thing, I think I always get from you, there's two bits from that organizational piece, is that you spoke about, it doesn't sound great, but for a lot of companies, it's about the performance of the individual, making sure that they can survive, or you put it in a slightly better way. But then the individual is the product for a lot of companies. They're the product going out there selling, doing the admin tasks. So actually, they need to make sure they can perform and understand what that performance is for themselves. And as an organization, this is where I find our conversations, Jake, super interesting. Is that the organizational kind of role in this has to be really simplistic and actually kind of provide the stable and supportive mannerisms so that people can go and have those holidays, make sure they're not working too hard and they're not overloading them, but encouraging them employees to individually take responsibility to do stuff for themselves. And I was thinking earlier on, B, when you were talking as well in regards to this, and so I'm going to say this and then you guys can discuss it. With engagement, pre-COVID, people were just going around their jobs, doing their things. Engagement in health and well-being and fitness, and this is probably where my understanding comes in better, is that a lot of people don't want to be engaged in that stuff anyway. But now when COVID come around and we worked at home, and then well-being was on everybody's minds because everybody was lonely and that was the only thing you could kind of do, has it now become a hotter topic? But because it's become a hotter topic, actually, we've recognized that maybe we don't engage as individuals on this as much as we should do. And now it's something which we can kind of use to and now reflect on and use as an engagement parameter.
Yeah, I mean, for most people, pre-pandemic, for a lot of people, and I was definitely included in this, we often take our health for granted. We think we're invincible. We think our health is something that we're always going to have. And then one of two things happen that make us reframe those thoughts and approach it differently. Either we have our own health problems and we're confronted by these issues, and suddenly we realize that we're not invincible and we're not superhuman and we have to take this seriously, or someone we love goes through something. So, for example, before my dad got ill, I absolutely was not looking after my health or meeting my own well-being needs, because I still do sort of think I'm superhuman, but I was even worse then. And, it wasn't until I lost one of the people I love most in the world to an illness where health suddenly became this crown on my head. And now what the pandemic has done, it's almost done that at mass level. Individuals have learned that their health is not a given, and it's something that they have to prioritize, and it's something that they have to be proactive about. And so we're seeing this shift. But then on the other side of that, what makes it more complicated is that the health, the fitness industry, the wellness industry is full of a lot of noise. It's full of a lot of rubbish. It can be really overcomplicated. It can be really overwhelming. So individuals almost don't then know what they're meant to be doing and how they should be doing it. And then you couple that with the fact that they are really stressed. They are really anxious. They barely have time to socialize with their friends, to eat dinner with their family, to hit their targets at work. And then you're asking them, okay, but now you need to go to this gym class or get these steps in or cook all these healthy meals. It's completely unobtainable to so many. And so that's where the work needs to be done, is actually how do we lower the barriers to entry? As Jake said, what does the workplace need to do? What's the environment they need to create? What are the times, the tools, the resources they need to give? And then at the individual level, how do we encourage individuals to take ownership of their health and to actually understand sometimes we need to take a step back, take two steps forward, and giving them the support and the education and the inspiration to be able to do that.
And it's if you look at public health data, although things are getting worse from the data, because the data we have available to us from workplace related illness, accidents, a lot of that is becoming a lot richer. But from a public health perspective, none of this is new. And I think that's what we tie into, is that we've had this period of COVID where, yes, people have had more time to start engaging in things. But this is not a new issue. And ultimately, it comes back to that people only change when they believe it's in their best interest. And that's not just with health, that's with anything. And I think that's where, when we look at it in the workplace, we have, because people spend most of their time at work, we have a beautiful opportunity to create an environment where we can make people understand that it's in their best interest to change their behaviors for them. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a responsibility of the organization, but it is an opportunity. And that's where when we talk about this whole sustainable high performance and the argument that we put forward in the white paper around engagement is that ultimately we're seeing low engagement. And if you look at the data in terms of the Oxford reports and the other reports talking about what happens in wellbeing programs, there are a couple of other meta-analyses that have come out subsequently. It's all down to the fact that individuals, a very few, engage in the first place. Most of the people that engage were already healthy, so didn't actually need what they needed, the care, and then drop off is huge, so that very few people have it. So it's not that the tool isn't right, it's that the people that need that tool aren't engaging in it. So that's why I think that the route forward is that how can we build awareness for individuals around where their health is, and then have them support them and encourage them and motivate them that it's in their best interest to change that behavior overall. And that's how we can create individuals that live better lives, that consequently perform better for the business. And from a business perspective, it's just how can we make sure that we give people enough time to be able to engage? And that's how the narrative now is like, let's not have one size fits all. It's about offering a variety of tools and a variety of ways to engage. And then how do we create, and as a business, how do we focus on the things that make the maximum impact for the minimum investment of time? Which for us, we see, if you look at, again, Gallup's report yesterday, we were talking about 70% of engagement is related to a manager. It's how do we create within teams that connection where we go, this is how we agree to work together. This is how we manage a situation if one of us is not in agreement, because workplace conflict is a huge negative on well-being. And how do we manage the workplace related factors and actually manage it, and then give people the time and space and the tools that they can actually prioritize their own health? And that's, Rich, I think that what we've talked about in terms of that, how do we separate that accountability? And it's, you're entirely in charge of your own health. But if we can give you the tools and the time and the awareness of how to make the changes, then we can make a big impact. And again, going back, I know we talk about coaching a lot, but that's why I think that having a tool that can make you aware of your own health and then give you some signposting to care and the right care that you can engage with is probably the best tool you can implement. And there are more in depth, and there are more out-depth ways of doing that. But at its core, if people can understand this is what my health is, here's the steps I can take to improve it, and here's how I can social proof that and share that with others, engagement goes through the roof if you do those things.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jake made two really important points there. It's what we do at an individual level, what we do at an organizational level. And at individual level, this is, and you both know HumanOS very well, we've built an entire platform around this and these different steps in your health journey. So individuals being able to track their behaviors, that their behaviors and their emotions are then delivered to them and summarized in really simple methods. So people are actually gaining that understanding. They can then talk with the coaches. They can go to the masterclasses. It's a step-by-step process for the individual, and you're allowing them to engage with what they want to engage with at the time that suits them based on their needs right then and there, because those needs will change. And so you need a solution that can adapt to those changes. Then on the other side of that, if we're taking a step back from the individual at the organizational level, exactly as Jake just said with this management piece, 82% of managers are accidental managers. They've had no formal training. So yes, they might be fantastic at their job-based skills, but actually what are their human-based skills like? What is their emotional intelligence? What is their communication? What is their conflict resolution? And Also, do we need to think from an organizational perspective, how are we measuring success, and actually reframing those measures, so that, historically, if you wanted to get a promotion and get more money, which lots of people do, you have to be promoted. With that promotion comes more humans that you are responsible for. A lot of people want the money. They don't want to be responsible for the humans. So then what happens? You have a lot of individuals in management positions responsible for a lot of people who don't necessarily have the skills to be there. So we need to reform, how are we developing our people? What does that velocity of growth look like? What does the internal recruitment look like? And actually ensuring we have the right people in the right places with the right skills, and they are being measured on things that are suitable to increase the well-being of the individual and the business performance.
I think it ties into when, return on investment has become a huge, buzzword that people use. What's the return on investment? What's the return on investment? But often most organizations don't have the tools to be able to talk about that. And I think it's, as Bianca says, it's how do we collect how people are feeling, but also collect what is the outputs that people are coming. And I think that there's a way for anyone who's in a multinational organization or an organization that does business with the EU CSRD regulations that will impact most this year. Some won't need to report till next year. But part of that is you'll need to be able to demonstrate, here's how we take feedback from employees. Here's how that feedback informs what we do. And then here's how we communicate back to employees how we're doing it. That's a very oversimplification of a very small part of a very large piece of regulation. But I think this is where there's a huge opportunity to gain trust with employees, because if we're measuring how do you, what is your subjective well-being? And, at its core, you can just use the Oxford set of 4 questions, which is happiness, stress, purpose, and competence, which I think are as good a set as any of questions. And then you look at, okay, based on that well-being index, and there, when you look at that, that's what Indeed reports about having increase in firm value, increase in asset value, increase in profitability for people that score higher on that. Then you just start looking at what are the outputs. So what's the sickness absence rates? What is the voluntary attrition? Are people, what's the insurance cost, or why are people making insurance claims, and looking at those. And that's a really simple way of starting to say, well, this is the return that we're seeing. And if you have the ability to, within your internal data analytics, to then go, okay, can we tag people with what they've engaged in? You can then start to say, hey, we know that people with high engagement have engaged in these tools. And then you can start to look at some really cool stuff. So that's what we're looking to do. And that's something that I'm looking to build out, because I think then if we, the argument over investment becomes super easy. It's like, this is what we're doing. This is how people are feeling, and this is what people are doing based on the interventions we've done. And we can start to then actually, rather than always looking external at best practice, we can then start to really look internal at best practice and what's going on around the world. And that gives a huge opportunity.
There's a lot to digest. Give me a second. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start. And I just think there's, people just making notes, I hope. I think we've given quite a lot of things going on. And I think, Jake, you began to lead into some of the solving issues there. When it comes to making these strategies a bit more engaging, having a bit more impact, what do you think some of the most important things are?
Well, I think the first thing is a really clear, if you're going to start talking about shared accountability, so where individuals are responsible for their own health, teams and leaders are there to create inclusion, well-being, and psychological safety. And as an organization, you're responsible for measuring and providing the tools in the environment. If you're really going to create that, you need to have a narrative or a direction. This is where we're trying to get to. because then you can start to have, rather than a parent-child relationship with employees, you can start to have an open engagement with employees of going, this is what we're trying to achieve. Here's all of our accountabilities, and here's how we're going to measure it. And I think then it's about, as an organization, just starting to do, and it's funny because the stuff is really basic, but sometimes I think, I really love when Jamie Broadley says this. He said, he talks about, sometimes it's the simple stuff, but it's not sexy, but it has big impact. I think if you just look at two really simple models, which is COM-B and EAST. So COM-B being, are we giving people the capability, the opportunity, and the motivation to change their behavior? So both employees and managers to do that. And it's almost like you run that over the tools or the if you're looking at apps or you're looking at initiatives, does this improve the capability, so the knowledge that people have? Does it give them the time, and does it motivate them? And if it doesn't do any of those things, then you've got to ask why, because there may be a reason, but just it's good to double check why. And then EAST is the engagement piece. So is it easy for someone to access, which doesn't necessarily have to be that we're going into full-blown apps, but if you have an intranet, is your intranet really easy to get to? Does it look good? Is there a form of social proof? And that social proof could be as simple as leadership stories. And then can you access it at a time that suits you? So it doesn't necessarily have to be during work or after work. It's when suits you in your day. And if you do those two things, you'll find, and if you stick to it and go, these are the only things that matter with our initiatives or our policies, and you'll suddenly find that things start to improve because you're being super targeted with how you deliver things, even if you're being broad, but you'll start to see that the engagement lifts. And we've already seen internally starting to have that approach is starting to have engagement in the interventions we're putting in place increase.
100%. And I think I couldn't agree more. And I think there needs to be a massive shift as well, sort of what Jake just said. But I'm a huge fan of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and they talk about this concept a lot. And it's that people, whether it's individuals or businesses, they spend so much time trying to be super smart instead of just trying to avoid being stupid. And we see that in our wellbeing strategies all the time. And organizations are focusing on all these fancy perks and these things that with all these bells and whistles, instead of just focusing on not being stupid. It does not matter what perks and benefits you have if you are not meeting the basic psychological needs of your people, if they are not in a safe environment, if they don't have a balanced life, if they are not developing personally and professionally, if they do not have meaning in their days, if it's not equitable, equal, if these things aren't being solved and you're not giving everyone a pair of shoes, you're giving everyone a pair of shoes that fits. It doesn't matter what fancy things you are doing. So going forwards, if you want to see a shift here, we need to be making sure we're not being stupid. We need to meet the basic psychological needs, and then we can do the fancy and fun stuff on top of that.
And it's around how we can then, by doing that, you can then look across your people. You can start to think about what are the real big risks to our people, and you can holistically look across the organization. You can then understand, if you're in one country, it's then one challenge. If it's sort of multi-country, it's then, okay, what's the maturity in different countries? Because obviously we'll have different policies, different processes, different legal requirements. And then you can really start to propose the organizational changes, and you can choose interventions which are going to provide you the biggest return. As Bianca says, if you do the basics super well, actually, a lot of the other pieces are innovative and really cool, but ultimately we're trying to change people's behaviors, and they should be the last things that come. It's making people aware and supporting them to make the right changes. That's the biggest impact we can have on people.
Yeah, 100%. If you've read the Deloitte Human Capital Trends Report 2024 and this concept of human sustainability, and we have to move away from this transactional approach of thinking with our people. And it's not just this extractive, how much value can I get from this person? It has to then also be, how much value am I giving this person? And whether you're talking about individual health or organizational wellbeing strategies, you have to be addressing all the facets. You know, you have to be looking at that person's emotional health, physical health, occupational health, social health, spiritual health, intellectual health, environmental, financial, and having, as we've said multiple times, giving the individual the time and the space and the resources to actually then be proactive in those areas as and when suits them in the most simplest form. And that's what the strategies have to be looking at. How will we create an environment where the individual can look at all areas of their health and engage with it mindfully and proactively?
Yes. Breathe. First off, did you both watch Jamie Broadley's podcast with me? Because you spoke about the right boot, the boots, and he kind of used that example, kind of leads perfectly from Jake's conversation about Jamie keeping it nice and simple, Jake keeping it nice and simple. So yeah, I thought you guys had just been watching my podcast. So well done, guys. But obviously shaking the head, Bianca.
Sorry. Yes.
I mean, I think it's great advice, and I don't want to just to reiterate the words that you've used. My question is, and this organizational team and individual level and structure we talk about, and the roles of each are so important. And the 70%, the importance of the 70% of the team managers, and I think we've spoken about the organization and individual quite a lot, and that importance of the team. My question is, to you both of you, like, I think you'll both answer this slightly differently. Where does it start? Like, at what point, what's the most important part to start with?
I would say culture. I think culture is such an important starting point. If you don't have the right culture, then everything else becomes really, really difficult. So it's how are you embedding that culture where people can communicate openly, where they feel heard, where they feel valued, supported, it's diverse, it's equal, and those basic psychological needs are being met. That's the basis then to build everything else on top of.
I think, echoing what B said, I think one of the key things is, and the way to describe this is, it's all very well having a policy, but there's a very big difference between having a policy and employees feeling permission to leverage that policy. So a big case of it is, if you have a narrative in terms of direction of travel, and you have leadership buy into that story, and you put that front and center, it then allows you to start to do the work, because you can do the work without that, but it will land so much quicker and it will accelerate it if you have that leadership buy into a narrative. And then in terms of the cultures start, and I'm a big believer that we can look at company culture across a wide thing, and you can do culture initiatives. My personal belief is that the most important culture is within a team, because my relationship with my manager and how we work as a team has the biggest impact on me versus how another team works and another team's culture. And we can't assume that every single team will have exactly the same culture, because they need different things. But it's around empowering managers to make sure they have permission to treat the individual in front of them as an individual, and not have to think about, I have X number of policies to implement, and to review, how can I make sure that this individual has what they need to be able to perform.
Yeah.
And if that's actually they're going to come into work at 10 because they've got childcare things in the morning, and actually by saying they can come in at 10 but finish at 7, then they're going to be able to perform really well. That's an adjustment to make. It's not everyone can do that. It's, I've treated this person as an individual case, and that's the best case scenario for them, and it works for the business. And I think there's an opportunity for us right now, in terms of, if we really want to be innovative, is start to give teams more flexibility to make adjustments that they think will have the biggest impact on performance.
Yeah.
And not have managers have to have a list of 30, 40 policies that they have to implement, and have the support to be able to make those adjustments individual to individual. Because then I believe that then you could have, it would simplify the DE&I conversation. It would simplify reasonable adjustments, because we'll be able to treat people as the person in front of them, as a human being, and then make the environment the best for that person to perform. if we did that with every person, then you'd probably see performance increase because you're trying to create the right environment for that individual.
100%. And being able, as a manager, you should be able to identify who on your team, what are they best at? What can you make them responsible for so that their own individual strengths and values are aligning with the organizational values? Because then that's how people want to work hard and that's how performance increases. Lack of supervisor support is the largest cause of burnout. And if you look at the Gartner report from 2023, individuals who have good management are 15 times more likely to excel and 3 times more likely to stay within the organization. They also said that a great manager can increase profitability by up to 48%. So then the ROI on the business and that whole argument is dealt with in one go, because actually your managers are doing the job the managers should do. Individuals are aligned, they're working towards their strengths, they're communicating, there's conflict, because there should always be conflict's healthy and it has to be done in the right manner, and then the business is performing. And so that's huge.
Rich, Bianca clearly took you calling me an encyclopedia of stats today to heart and is rolling them out. She's coming hot with everything, and she's completely right.
In my defense, I'm doing a lot of talks this week, so the numbers are at the top of my brain because I know I need them. But I have got a bit excited with the stats.
Do you know what? I said this would be difficult to start with, but you gave one person provides information, the next person builds on the information, the next person, and I'm sitting here going, I don't know how to add all this. There's so much being given, and I love it. But what I've taken away from that, in my own Richard Turner way, I was going to call myself my nickname, but I don't do that on LinkedIn. My Richard Turner way was that it kind of doesn't start unless the organization has a direction or has a purpose or a value. Once that's in line, then allowing the teams to then manage and support and become their own mini culture for everybody to thrive.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, I really do believe in 10, 15 years, you won't even see this like hierarchy we see within organizations at the moment. We're already seeing lots of organizations get rid of it. And I think it's going to become much more common that people work in groups and individuals are given sole responsibility and they work in almost like focus groups with one another for the support around those tasks. But it's not this like linear sort of system we see at the moment. And it's for that exact reason. There's so much sort of cloudiness around how effective actually is it. And when you do that, you miss out on so many strengths of individuals. And I also think we're going to see a lot more sort of cross-department, cross-skill individuals who are exceptional to things you may not have put them together in one role, and actually see these new roles formed. And especially as technology continues to advance, we're going to see all these changes. And I think this manager piece is just the start of those conversations and the start of that movement as we start to see the way we work and the way organizations are structured change massively.
Yeah. I guess my own head, my challenge, and comes back to what I was saying beforehand, is that as human beings, we probably, I mean, this comes back to the individual piece. We can create as, I'm just going to start up a whole new conversation, but screw it, why not? Is that the organization and teams, it's great if we can create them, that changes our well-being at work. But what happens then when we go and we have that great space? You said this earlier on, B, about people don't put their health first unless something happens. How do we get the individuals now to put themselves first? And that's where I think coaching comes in. And that's where I think working with people on a one-to-one basis, and it works with leaders and managers and everybody individually, but actually getting them to set their own specific goals to success. And then hopefully, because it's internally motivated, they engage. But that's where I see the challenge. And we talk about engagement within wellbeing. I don't think that's a thing now. I think that's a thing in general. I think it's been around forever. People potentially don't engage within health and wellbeing, but that's been the case for a long period of time.
Yeah, and I mean, you're never going to get 100% of people engaging with it. And also that's more than okay. But it's about the ones who do want to, that they can, and they have the correct resources available to them. I think we need to start massively moving away from this term of like work-life balance. And actually, as individuals and organizations, how are we just creating balanced lives? We use the term high performance a lot. It's all over the white paper. You know, we're big fans of it. What is high performance? So we're not talking about high performance like corporate athletes. Like if that's what you want to be, fantastic. But actually high performance is when you are thinking at your best, feeling at your best, performing at your best. And that's in every area of your life. That's in your relationships, that's in your work, that's in your training, that's in your eating, that's in your sleeping. And so it's for individuals who do want to be at their best. How can they then engage with that and be proactive about that? And if they don't want to, fine, that is also okay, but at least you've given them the chance and the opportunity.
And you bring this back to the workplace, like there could be, you could go, if you think about workplace health, you could go full parent-child relationship, right? You could have mandated health checks on a yearly basis that then results in an individual getting a personalized health plan, and then you could affect part of their remuneration. So part of their salary or bonus could be based on how much progress they make against that goal. I'm going to caveat that I don't believe that's the right thing to do, but I'm saying that's like an extreme that you could go down. But I think when we started talking about that individual teams organization, it's about reciprocated accountability, whereas we all have a responsibility and accountability to each other. Like the business is responsible for making sure that employees have everything they need to be able to perform and do well at their job. Now that is, you can let the whole thing, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The individual still has to take that final step. But if you show that this is a reciprocated responsibility, then the vast majority of people will likely take some form of accountability for their health. There will always be those that don't. And there are many reasons for that. You know, if you dig into the literature, both socioeconomic background, postcode, country of birth, culture, there are so many factors that as an employer, you just cannot control. But if you know that you're creating the environment by providing the right tools, you're measuring their effectiveness, you're embedding well-being into business practice, looking at things like, you know, we've just talked about how to have that coaching conversation as managers and teams, but also embedding in terms of having access to coaching, both internal and external. And you're measuring that. And I think that's the way to go. And by having that open conversation of going, this is a joint accountability, you start to break down that parent-child relationship. And you start to lay out the expectations that an employee can give the employer and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably why when we start to look at the gap between under 35s and over 35s, I think over 35s have been subconsciously, that accountability conversation has been quite, it's been there but unsaid.
Mm-hmm.
And younger generations maybe are not having the conversation, the accountability. This is what we're going to give you, and this is what we expect in return, and allowing them, an individual, to make a choice based on, I'm into that or I'm not into that. I think we've moved away from that for new generations, so that if we can bring that conversation back, I believe that will help us start to close up the gap as well between younger under 35s and over 35s in terms of their self-reported health.
100%. And everyone, without going too deep into a whole new can of worms, so we've got about 5 minutes remaining, but, you know, everyone's talking about Gen Z, and the way they approach work. You know, Generation Alpha are going to be in the workforce in 3 years. And these are individuals who have grown up in a completely different, technologically advanced world. And so, you know, when we're looking at statistics of people who do want to engage with their health, people who don't, it's only increasing those who do. And we are only increasing in challenges we are seeing that we need to support. Resilience in the under 30s is 30% lower. Women under 30 at 20% more risk of depression than any other age group or gender. 16 to 29-year-olds, I'll try and make this last stat of the day. 16 to 29-year-olds are twice as lonely now as those over 70. So it's these individuals who are seeing these challenges, who are coming into the workplace, who do want to be proactive about their health. They're coming out in more debt than we've ever seen, less chance of getting on the property ladder, barely able to buy a coffee, let alone, pay for a holiday. And they are going into that workforce and saying they would rather have less money to have more meaning at work and to have more health benefits. This is showing you what they are interested in, and we have to, as organizations, take that seriously. So although, yes, okay, you may not get everyone engaging with it, as we continue to go forward, those who are engaging with it are only going to engage with it more. And then lastly, on Jake's point, it's this really fascinating time. And I say fascinating time because it's the inner psychology nerd in me, but it's this really fascinating time at the moment where we're seeing the most generational difference in the workforce as well. People are staying in the workplace for longer, they're entering younger, and we're seeing the most variety in the way we approach work. It is no longer you go into one job, you stay in that company, you progress in that company, 50 years later, you retire. Individuals are going in, they're changing industries, they're changing careers, they're changing companies. And so what we need to do is take both of these sets of individuals who have fantastic elements of their approach to work and actually really challenging elements. You don't want to be the individuals who work your way, fight your way to the top, end up with heart disease, end up with anxiety, end up with depression, end up putting yourself into an early grave. If that approach worked, we wouldn't be seeing the challenges we're seeing. Equally, you can't be coming into the workforce thinking you can work from Bali every other Friday, that you can rock up at 11 a.m. and leave at 4 p.m. and that you're going to be CEO next week. Like, you have to learn delayed gratification and sacrifice and stress. But equally, there's a really beautiful and correct approach in both. And it's the organization's job and responsibility. How do we get those groups to communicate? How do we get them to work together? How do we get them to be on the same page and they align and the business aligns? And then that's what's going to lead to really successful futures for the business.
I think that's a good place to finish.
Absolutely.
I will do one more thing. I know that we are on the hour nearly. I always like to round off the podcast with a final bit of advice. And normally I would do 3, but for time, can you just give me your one top tip for this? B, go first.
Book a free complimentary call with HumanOS and come
We're not plugging.
I'm a saleswoman after all. I'll put the link in the notes.
Yeah.
No, it would be meet the basic psychological needs. Take a step back, try and avoid being stupid as opposed to being intelligent. And actually, are you meeting the basic psychological needs of your people? And book a call with HumanOS.
I like that.
Yeah, you might as well plug them as well.
Mine would be start to have the conversation around pressure versus performance and understand that within a workplace, there are times where recovery is needed and you can't perform at 100% all the time. So start to open up that conversation with your colleagues, with your manager, with your teams. And by pursuing that piece and having the narrative of well-being and performance and the ability to perform will start to shift the culture into a positive line.
Jake actually did a really good HumanOS article on that, if anyone wants it. On the HumanOS website.
Yeah, HumanOS. I didn't make HumanOS a thing. Thank you, you two legends. B, can you spend 2 seconds finding the link to download the white paper and add it to the comments?
Yeah, absolutely, of course.
Because I have it somewhere, but for me to find that, it's going to be a lot harder than you. I appreciate both of you.
If I put it in the chat, will it go there?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries.
Thank you ever so much. As I said, I do appreciate both of you. Lots of really good bits of advice. Brain is exploded with information again. Thank you. Next week, I am talking to Bobby about actually following kind of on from this, not the trying to go away from the cookie cutter approach to wellbeing strategies. So kind of looking at that, looking at data, which could be relatively interesting. That sounds really terrible way to sell that. It should be great. But for meanwhile, see you all soon.
Cheers, everyone.
Hey, where you are, you two. You two stay still.